Hi, my name is Rachael Davis. I'm the editor-in-chief of Technician, and I'll be the moderator of the debate. And I have three panelists with me if they would like to introduce themselves.
Okay, so I will go first. I am Elikem Dodor. I am the editor-in-chief for Nubian Message.
Hello, I am UgonnaEzuma-Igwe. I am the managing editor of Nubian Message.
And I'm Alicia Thomas. I'm the managing editor for Technician.
Awesome. So they're the ones who will be asking all the questions tonight. So what I'll be doing is just explaining the rules and jumping in if there are any issues. So first, if you're not a candidate on the panel, please mute your mic, keep it muted at all times to limit distractions. And so I'll start off by reading the rules of the vice president debate. The vice presidents will go first. And if the candidates have any questions, please jump in and ask me. And I'm going to read the rules after every portion. So the debate is split between presidential candidates and vice presidential candidates. For both positions, there'll be 1-minute introductions. Immediately after, we will dive into the first round of questions. For the vice president candidates, there'll be 3 questions in the first round. They'll be asked to both of them. Candidates will have 2 minutes each to respond to those questions. And in the first round, there's no time for debating. In the second round, there'll be 6 questions, which will be candidate specific. So each candidate will have 3 questions specifically for them. The candidate will have 2 minutes to respond, and then there'll be 2 minutes of debate after, where the other candidate can jump in, they can have conversations or fight if they feel like it, but hopefully not. And then after the second round, there'll be 1 minute for closing statements. Does anybody have any questions? Cool. So I have time cards for the candidates. I'll be keeping time as well. And I forgot it's mirrored. So I have time cards for 1 minute, 30 seconds, 10 seconds, and time. So if the candidates can, I don't know, like pin me or something, just so they know how much time they have left. And so we will begin. Natalie, you'll be going first with your opening statement, and just start whenever. Actually, hold on. Yes. Natalie, you have 1 minute for your opening statement, and I'll start whenever you start talking.
Good evening, NC State. My name is Natalie Bress. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a junior studying electrical engineering, and I'm running to be your next student body vice president. I know at first glance it may appear to be a disadvantage that I'm new to student government, but I'm here to prove otherwise. I believe that my outside experiences and fresh perspectives can spark change and create a positive impact on our university. With my experience as an out-of-state student, park scholar, group fitness instructor, and 321 coffee officer, I've been able to see how campus operates through various lenses, as well as lead several groups on campus. I've attended numerous leadership and diversity trainings through NC State, and I'm dedicated to using this knowledge that I have gained to help address the biases we hold and make us more aware when serving the student body. I am devoted to addressing the ways in which we can support students struggling with their mental health, as well as representing and supporting our graduate students and the difficulties they may face during their time at NC State. Mackenzie and I are passionate about addressing the concerns of each and every student so that we can develop a healthy environment where each and every student feels supported and embraced by the Wolfpack family.
Thank you. So, thank you for your opening statement. Madison, you may start whenever.
Hey everybody, my name is Madison Keyes. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm running to be your student body vice president. I'm also majoring in psychology and I minor in music composition. So although my experience is out of student government, my passion and the skills that I've learned from various leadership roles that I've had, like being an orientation leader, being a president of Musical Empowerment, which is a nonprofit student organization, and a resident advisor and mentor, as well as my activism, will add a strong new voice to the session. Also, as a member of various minority groups, I've gone on a journey to just make myself aware of identities and beliefs other than my own. Therefore, as your student body vice president, I will listen to you and I will advocate for you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So, done with the opening statements. Next, we'll move to the first round of questioning. Just a reminder, you each have 2 minutes to answer them. Elikem, if you'd like to kick it off with the question.
Okay, so for the first question, I'm going to ask it to both of you. the vice president, but I'm going to start with Natalie first. So seeing how both of you mentioned in your opening statements how you have no prior student government experience, what specific experience outside of SG do you think is going to be most official or like most efficient to make you an effective VP? And also, how do you think that these experiences compare to those who have been in SG previously?
Thank you for the question. As I mentioned before, I've had the pleasure of being a group fitness instructor at WellRec for the past 3 years, as well as president of 321 Coffee and an outreach coordinator, and an out-of-state student. And I think those together have really given me like a greater perspective of campus. And I've been able to meet several students who have had similar and different experiences on campus. I am a big communicator. I love talking to people. I love hearing about people's lives and just like everything that they've been through. And so I think that's what really helps me here is I have been able to have very personal conversations with a lot of students on campus about how they think what changes could be made to campus in order for their experience to be better. I know that's not student government related, but I think it helps that I have that outside perspective of it being like out of state and how to make out of state students feel more welcome on campus. Bringing in that like motivating factor from being a group fitness instructor, I've learned to really connect with students, motivate people who might be struggling with being motivated to exercise or like using exercise as a remedy for their mental health. I've been able to lead people through various lenses like that. And I think that outside perspective can definitely help me relate to various students and directors in my position as vice president.
And then now direct the question to Madison. Would you like me to repeat it?
Yes, please.
So seeing how neither of you have student government experience, what experience do you have outside of student government that you think would make you more an effective vice president? And also, how do you think these experiences compare to those who have been in student government previously?
Yeah, so I would say that the most significant experience that has given me a good lens into how I could be a good leader in student government is with my role with musical empowerment. So when I came on last year, it's supposed to be a 2-person job, and there are some circumstances with the club that made it so that I was the only one that was supposed to be leading, which was it was a very interesting experience, but one that I would never like take away, just because I've learned so much about how to be an efficient leader, how to organize a group under immense pressure. I had a summer to learn everything about the organization. So that's definitely made me like very aware of how to look at the big picture and to coordinate with other people with just in multiple different ways, because it's a very intensive organization. I would also say that my role as a resident advisor, a resident mentor, those have really given me a perspective with like students. So like I've really been able to connect with students over the years and really understand what the issues are on campus just because of my conversations with them. And also I've just, again, like I mentioned in my opening statement, I've just made myself aware about like other people's identities that differ from my own. So in ways that I've done that were through the civil rights trip. So the campus offers a civil rights trip to Alabama, and I've served as a mentor on that trip. I've been a participant, and I've also been on the alternative service break, which has given me a good like perspective on like financial needs of other people as well. So I've kind of leaned into those different identities. And I just, as someone also that struggles with mental health, I really find myself like really wanting to advocate for students with mental health issues, just because, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, I understand that the way that we're going to return to normalcy is going to be kind of an interesting process for our students. So I really want to make sure that I can provide a voice for those students and advocate for resources for them through that. So
thank you. Sorry, you were over time, but thank you for your statement.
All right, for the second question, we're going to ask this first to Madison Keys. Many students have voiced their displeasure with the university for not including enough student input when making decisions revolving around the COVID-19 pandemic. In both of your platforms, you stated the importance of these student voices and amplifying them. How are you going to provide students an accessible way to voice their concerns to your administration during your term? And how have you previously been involved in making sure those concerns are addressed?
Yeah, for sure. I would definitely start by saying that we are actually working on a commission with COVID-19 to get student input. So we in the past, like our 145 COVID bill was being worked on to create a student health committee, and we're really wanting to make sure that we get more student input because it's really important for the students to get a voice on how we need to address our return to normalcy. Obviously, in the past, our administration has kind of varied with how classes have been addressed, and we really want to make sure that we can provide the resources that the students need by creating that commission and getting those student voices on there, getting a diverse group of students, that is. So.
All right. Asking the same question to Natalie Bress. Many students have voiced their displeasure with the university for not including enough student input when making decisions revolving around the COVID-19 pandemic. In both of your platforms, you stated the importance of these student voices and amplifying them. How are you going to provide students with an accessible way to voice their concerns to your administration during your term? And how have you previously been involved in making sure those concerns are addressed?
So as far as being previously involved, I know with my lack of student government experience, I haven't really had that experience, but I have had lots of conversations with students on what they're currently going through being a student during this pandemic. And so kind of having that relational level where I've been able to communicate with students on like, hey, I'm going through the same thing. What are you feeling? Bringing that to the table. As well as Mackenzie and I are really focused on being accessible and open to students being able to come talk to us, like having office hours where they can come voice their concerns, just being really relatable and on a level where students feel really comfortable to come talk to us. And so if they're finding that they have issues with how the university is handling COVID or just any issue at all, that they feel like they can email us, shoot us an email or come talk to us in our office, and that we will bring those concerns to administration and voice their concerns and represent them. Additionally, there are so many things that effects that COVID is going to have later on, like food and housing insecurity and a lot of students just financial insecurities. And so working on having ways to communicate with students and figuring out how we can best help them, like what they're going through currently financially, so that the university can help them. As we got that email saying that they're planning to open up completely in the fall. And so really working, like we are opening up, so how can we make sure that every student is prepared for that reopening, that they have the resources they need, and if they've been going through struggles currently because of this pandemic, they don't feel like they are no longer supported by the university.
Okay, the next question will be addressed to both candidates, but I will be asking Natalie first. What are the tangible steps that you and your running mate plan to take to raise awareness of and combat sexual assault on campus?
So thank you for the question. Initially, we know that with Title IX, Betsy DeVos' new rule reduced that universities only have to have minimal compliance with Title IX. However, NC State has been above those. They continue to be above that minimum compliance. However, there was the addition of a third hearing where the survivor of a sexual assault can now be cross-examined, and that can be really detrimental and damaging when they're trying to recover from an event like this. So we just want to make sure that we have either retired judges or people that are willing to be advocates for these students. So these students are aware, making them more aware that there are people out there that can advocate for them in these trials. And so they're not alone. Now that there's a rule that they're allowed to be cross-examined, there is someone there that has their back. They are there for them. They don't have to go through it alone. And it's not somebody they just picked at random. It is somebody, I mean, they can pick somebody at random if that's who they trust and they want. But we also want to be that resource that they know they can come to us and say, like, I need somebody to advocate for me. And we have trained individuals who can represent them in these trials and really care for this student and know them deeply and what they're going through, can properly advocate for them.
Madison, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
What are the tangible steps that you and your running mate will take to raise awareness of and combat sexual assault on campus?
Yeah, so Aaron passed R85 in the 99th session, in which the student body president, Flowers, had it become a commission for Title IX. And Aaron actually served on a chair for that commission. So that bill involved free legal support for NC State complainants. And those are the people that are filing the complaint against the accusers. So although Title IX was disrupted by changing admin in the United States, President Biden wrote an executive rule that forced the current Secretary of Education to overrule Betsy DeVos's final rule that gutted Title IX protections for survivors. So what we want to do is to create a coalition of student leaders that will increase awareness and advocacy on campus relating to survivors. We also want to create resources that would support the survivors that would go through the Title IX process. So what that would entail is creating graphics for survivors to legally, so that they could contribute to stopping the silence through their stories. I would also say that we want to improve the way that sexual assault training is done. So what we'd like to do with that is to improve the existing framework and enforce that framework, so that although it is a module that is being required, we want to make sure that the students are well aware of like what actually goes on with sexual assault and how they can help combat that. So.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for your answers. That was round one of the vice president portion. So we'll be moving on to the second portion. And just a reminder, each candidate will get 3 questions specifically for them, and you'll have 2 minutes to answer, followed by 2 minutes of debate. So yeah, Elikem, go ahead.
Okay, so the first question is for Madison. In your platform, you discuss increasing scholarships for students of color. Can you specifically answer where exactly do you plan on getting this money from, as well as who will be responsible for the management of said scholarships?
Yeah, so what we would like to do with that is to create a commission, and investigate the differences between scholarship opportunities for Black and white students before they come to college. So with that, what we like to do is to talk with diversity affairs and university affairs to just like, basically what we want to do is to create an executive order just to investigate that, because we understand that the information is different, and we want to, while I'm not exactly sure where we would get the money from right now, I do know that the diverse amount of student voices that would be on the commission would definitely serve us well in how we would be able to gather the funds for that. And I think that definitely the first start would be to get that commission going.
Yeah, so Natalie, if you would like, you can jump in, or you can say no.
I don't really have anything to debate.
Okay, awesome. We'll go to the next question for Natalie.
So this question is for Natalie. 2 main aspects of your platform for student government vice president is to create a happier and healthier campus through increasing the amount of resources available to students. What resources are you looking to improve, and what are you planning to add in order to achieve this goal?
Thank you for the question. So something I'm really passionate about on this platform is creating a program for students to use exercise or explore using exercise as a remedy for their mental health. We see with the new gym on campus that we have a lot of fitness resources here. We have a lot of organizations that are committed to fitness. And so exploring how we can work with them to create a framework for students to use exercise as a remedy for mental health. College brings so much stress to our lives, more than we've probably ever experienced. I mean, you get here, you're away from home. It's just hard. It's so much harder than school we've had before. There's so many things that we go through, and especially now, I think students are going through so much more. And so this is like more important than ever, is letting students know that there's a support network for them. Exercise is so good for your mental health. It's been proven scientifically, and we have a great counseling center, but I think some students are wanting to explore other ways than that. I've talked with several students who are. I think that creating some sort of support network where they can exercise together, they can meet an accountability buddy. They have not even only the counseling center, but now they have a support network. They know they're around other students who might be struggling as the same thing as them, as well as they're exercising away that stress and anxiety that they might be going through. So that right now is like the thing I'm most passionate about, because I know COVID has brought so much stress to a lot of students' lives.
Madison, would you like to say anything?
Yes. So with this initiative, so I noticed that this is one of the only wellness department initiatives that you are focused on. So I think it's a great initiative. However, the wellness and recreation and the counseling center already coordinate events for exercise to support mental health. Also, some of the other things are that some students can't exercise, and they also have anxiety about exercising publicly. The other thing about this is that exercise is a small part of supporting yourself mentally. It is a big part. I'm sorry, it is a big part, but I would just say that there are a lot of other ways that people are able to improve on their mental health, and it is difficult to, it is a social anxiety for some people. So I'm just curious how you're going to combat those concerns, just because it does seem like it is a little bit exclusionary to those people that can't exercise or have that anxiety about exercising publicly.
Of course. Thank you, Madison, for the question. So I know like there are students that would be willing to exercise, and I hope that would create a good impact on their life and help with their mental health. But like you said, there are students that will be afraid to exercise publicly. And that's why not only having an exercise group, but maybe just creating a support network where students can get together and you can find a buddy there. Like I said, an accountability buddy. It doesn't have to be exercising. It could just be knowing that there's comfort in knowing that other people are going through the same thing as you, I think. And so just creating more like group resources for students to talk with other students beyond just like the professionals in the counseling center, as well as we have wellness instructors on campus. And so encouraging students to use those resources and talk with wellness instructors.
Okay, I don't have any further questions.
Okay, this question is for Madison. Gender inclusive housing is a subject candidates have been trying to push for the past 3 years. Why do you and your running mate believe it's important for the university to offer gender inclusive housing, and how will you advocate for this to become a reality?
Yeah, so we definitely want to advocate for gender inclusive housing. The issue is that the UNC System Board of Governors has a policy that keeps NC State from creating gender inclusive housing options. However, through our connections with the Association of Student Governments, we really hope that we can work to overturn that policy so that we can create those options available. And Erin has been involved with ASG for over a year, so she would definitely be able to use her position to advocate for this change to the ASG president. If this policy is overturned, then NC State would be able to explore options on campus for underserved populations and make all students feel safe in housing. But our biggest goal is to use our power through ASG to advocate to the UNC System Board of Governors, the highest level, to overturn that policy.
Okay, so in terms of like what would be your action plan if that policy could not be overturned? How could you still allow students to have some sort of connection otherwise? And like, yeah, what is your action plan with that? Because if it in the case that it isn't reversed.
Yeah, for sure. So we still want to work to make sure that that housing is still going to be inclusive. So again, we're going to try to advocate to the administration to see if we can get those changes in for how housing addresses those transgender students that are able to live in the housing that they want to that they identify with. So what we're going to try to do is to use our connections to talk to diversity outreach, university affairs, again to ASG, just to see what we can do to make sure that there are more options for transgender students to feel like they are being more included in housing.
Everybody good for that question? Perfect.
Okay, so the next question is for Natalie. How does your experience as an out-of-state student impact your total view of NC State? What are some of your struggles? How will you be able to help not only out-of-state students, but transfer students adjust to the NC State community?
Thank you for the question. So not only with my experience as an out-of-state student, but Mackenzie and I have also had a few personal conversations with a lot of transfer students and just talked about the kind of how they missed out on like the Wolfpack Welcome Week, and they felt like there wasn't anything specialized to transfer students because, you know, you go in as a freshman. For me, I was out of state and I was meeting other freshmen. It was great. But as a transfer student, you might be like a sophomore or a junior and you want to meet other sophomores and juniors. And so working on creating more events for students who are like hearing them out, hearing their ideas in terms of like what events we could host so that transfer students can meet each other who are who came on campus that year or who just want to meet new transfer students. I think we had that opportunity as mostly freshmen for Wolfpack Welcome Week, and they deserve that same opportunity as well. In terms of being an out-of-state student, being far away from home, I'm like 11 hours away, I definitely had to figure out how to make NC State my home, and my freshman year was quite a struggle. I didn't have the best roommate situation, and so I think it really helped me to like figure out ways in which I could make a family at NC State. So I joined organizations, I joined clubs. That's how I got into fitness. So really just using my experience of like getting myself out there and kind of figuring out helping other students do that. And so one of those ways is a virtual activity night where students can come together and meet each other online using that post-COVID like internet comfort that we have and helping students who might be uncomfortable with doing in-person events like showing up alone for their first time on campus, finding a way where they can meet friends in breakout rooms and activity nights and then create connections from there and go from there to in-person interactions. So that's one big thing that I really want to push for so that we can create more meaningful friendships on campus.
Madison, do you have anything?
Yeah, so I'm just curious, what type of events would you want to implement with, I know you were talking about getting those Wolfpack Welcome Week events for transfer students. What types of events are you looking through and which departments would you want to advocate that through?
I think following very similar to what we do with freshmen, like we have WellRec comes out with all of the clubs and intramurals that we have. And then we have every organization on campus that welcomes students, very similar to that. And like transfer students aren't prohibited from going to that, so they can still go and see what campus offers them. But like I said, I don't come from being a transfer student, so it would take having more meaningful conversations with them and saying, like, what would you want to see on campus? But probably really tailoring to each student, like the different things that students like to do. So having some sort of sports events, arts and entertainment events, kind of everything that campus offers, but really pushing and sending that out to students that we know are transfers so they can come together and meet each other.
So how are you gonna like publish that out and like advertise that, like through like what means would you want to do that?
Well, one push we have is working with OIT to consolidate on a tab on MyPack all of the resources that NC State offers. And so maybe something easy to navigate on there, like if you're a transfer student, these are what the events we have on campus. These are ways to get involved or meet other transfer students. I think students get really overwhelmed with all of the resources that NC State offers. And so finding a way where they could just click a button on the portal that we all use to enroll and check our classes, it's just another tab on there where they can say like, oh, look, a transfer. Oh my gosh, there's so many resources for me here. So figuring out something like that where it's really easy for students to access.
Great, thank you. Next question.
All right, this question is for Madison Keith. Your platform touches on a few different ways you want to reduce the stigma of receiving mental health care, the mural project, basic QPR training, and suicide prevention awareness. How will you and your running mate go further in spreading awareness about mental health in our campus community? Do you think students are currently underserved in this area?
Yeah, just to start off with that last bit, I would definitely say that students are underserved in this area just because although I will say I do appreciate the work that the counseling center has been doing to advocate for students during COVID. But like I said earlier, I think the most important thing is just understanding what is going to impact students when we return to normalcy. Once students are able to go back to the counseling center, we want to use that advocacy to make that mural in the counseling center to make sure that students feel like they feel more safe when they go to their counseling appointments. We also want to make sure that again, QPR training at orientation, that's going to be intentionally inclusive because that's going to reach to all of the students as they come into campus. And of course, we'd have a counselor on site to help them with that. And honestly, I mean, one of the biggest things is just making sure that we can offer the students the resources as they come because of how they're affected because of the changing states in COVID and everything. So again, I mean, excuse me, like suicide prevention awareness, like one of our other initiatives, obviously there's been a rise in deaths due to suicide because of COVID. I've suffered through a loss through that means, and I would definitely say that that's something that has definitely struck our campus and it's very tragic. So we really want to make sure that we push that information out there and use those resources with the counseling center to make sure that that gets out there.
How do you plan to connect with students and figure out the resources that they need in terms of the mental health struggles they might be going through? Not everyone is comfortable going to the counseling center. So how are you going to represent the students that don't feel comfortable using that outlet and figuring out the best ways to represent them and what they're going through?
Yeah. Sorry, can you repeat the question one more time? I was just, sorry.
Yeah. You just sort of had a big push on students using the counseling center, but there's a lot of students that don't feel comfortable with that. They feel more comfortable through other resources. So one, how do you plan to communicate with students and figure out the struggles that they might be having? And second, how do you plan to, do you plan to offer any other resources to the students beyond just encouraging them to use the counseling center? Because I think that's very encouraged from freshman year through orientation. And there's a lot of people who don't feel comfortable using that.
Yeah, so I would say to that the QPR training would definitely be a big help with that because they're giving students those resources on how to help themselves as well as other people and how to react to students that have suicidal ideation. I'd also say that we want to get a bigger push out with social media just to have those resources just pushed out there. We want to see what the students are most comfortable with. And, our platform is a working platform. So we are taking those ideas and as they come, we want to make sure that we get that student input and that we want to make sure how to best support them through, again, social media resources, doing those connections with the counseling center to make sure that students get the support they need.
Thank you.
Okay, this question is for Natalie. The lack of lighting in many parts of campus has been a continuous point of concern for many students. How will you and your running mate, decrease any fear students might have due to that issue? And how do you plan to remedy and resolve it during your term?
So currently NC State has like a best path or best lighted path for students to walk through. But it doesn't, like if you looked at what it is, it's like the shortest way to get to main campus where there's most lighting and the safest spots. But they're kind of counterintuitive, like they go through a parking lot. And so most people don't think to like walk through where cars are driving. So making those more published out in the university so that students are aware of those, whether that be pushing that more on orientation when you're walking students through campus, like showing them the best paths to go through to campus, the most lighted paths, having booklets for students, having them on signs outside of residence halls, making RAs more aware of these so they can educate their residents on what the best way is to get to and from their dorm, to and from their classes they're going to, especially at night. So yeah, just figuring out the best ways to connect with students and make them more aware of this path that the university has created so that they are traveling safely across campus.
Can I debate? Okay. Yeah, so I would say to that how exactly are you implementing this? Because with our initiatives, we want to add more blue lights to our campus, and we want to really emphasize like how we're going to create more safety on campus. So like how exactly are you going to get that lighting in there? Like what departments are you going to really try to reach out to with that?
Oh, it's not necessarily implementing the lighting, it's that there's lighted paths already. And if there isn't, working with staff and facilities to make sure that the lights are kept up to date and the paths are lighted. But the university has made the best lighted path, like the best path to get through campus. I think it's in the facilities master plan. And that like students aren't aware of that. I am a junior and I did not know that was a thing. And we've talked to a lot of students and they also did not know that was a thing. So really, no matter what, there are students that are going to be walking across campus late at night. Unfortunately, it's like it cannot be safe. And so we want to make sure that if they are doing that, they are educated about the best ways to get across campus. That is, they talk to their resident advisors frequently or they see them frequently. So making sure that the resident advisors are up to date on that. Maybe having a sign right outside the classroom that they're walking out of, like, hey, if you're leaving here, this is the best way to get back to main campus. So just having signs, brochures, making faculty and staff very aware of this so they can continue to educate students, making orientation leaders aware so that they will educate the students coming into campus, that students come in knowing that there's a path for them when they're walking through.
Okay. Yeah, I have no further questions on that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. That wraps up the second portion of the vice president debate. And we will start with Madison this time for her 1-minute closing statement.
Awesome. Yeah, so firstly, I just wanted to thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk. I really appreciate it. So while me and Aaron are an unconventional team, I feel like teams like ours have a sharp eye for the wide array of issues that students face on campus. I also feel like that's especially the case for us considering our total experience and how diverse it is with the different dimensions of campus life, especially with our leadership experience. We add up to 8 years of leadership experience. So what we really want to do is to make a difference in student government, and we want to do that by advocating for students so that they can face a more unified, equitable, and safe campus. So thank you.
Thank you. Natalie?
I just want to say thank you to everyone who's come out tonight and listened to us, as well as the technician and Nubian for hosting us tonight. I encourage you all to review Mackenzie and I's platform at mackenzieandnat.com or also our social medias at Mackenzie and Nat. We believe that the various conversations we have had with students they have impacted our platform. They have created our platform. They're really focused on serving each and every student on campus. We're excited to hopefully get to represent each of our students next year. So have a wonderful weekend and go Pack.
So we're going to start the president portion. Let me just go over the rules again. So just like the VPs, the president will have a minute each for opening statements, followed by the first round of questioning. However, for the presidents, they'll be asked the same 4 questions instead of 3. And they'll, can you mute yourself, Mackenzie? Sorry, the feedback. You're good. So yeah, they'll be asked 4 questions and they'll each have 2 minutes to answer. No debate in the first round. And then for the second round, there'll be 8 questions that are candidate specific. Each candidate will get 4 each, 2 minutes to respond, and then 2 minutes for debate. And once again, for the debate, just hop right in right after the person is done answering. So for the opening statements, Erin, it's all you.
Okay. Hey, everyone. My name is Erin Foote. I use she, her pronouns, she, hers pronouns. And I'm a junior majoring in both political science and philosophy. And it is my greatest honor to be running for your next student body president. Throughout my time at NC State, I've held various leadership roles, both inside and outside student government. And I can confidently say I know the ins and outs of student government like the back of my freaking hand, which right now has a little bit of lip gloss on it. Outside of student government, I've worked hard to make connections with students and to learn about the struggles they face. And I'm not here to admit that I know the struggles that every student face, especially if someone of my own identity of being a white student at a PWI. But I mentioned that to say that I've committed to doing it in the past and I commit to doing it in the future as your student body president. Madison and I have a vision for the future of NC State where every student has that voice that they deserve. And I hope you use yours March 15th.
Awesome. Thank you. Mackenzie, start whenever you're ready.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. Hello, Wolfpack. My name is Mackenzie Heblin. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a 3rd year studying electrical engineering with a minor in math, and I'm running to be your next student body president. So this year, I currently serve as student body vice president, and I've been able to address numerous crises surrounding the university, including the university's response to COVID-19, the racial unrest and injustice that we continue to experience, and then the food and housing insecurity that plague our students. We've completed a lot of great initiatives this session, but NC State still has a lot of room for growth and reform, and Nat and I are excited to lead the charge. Our platform has an achievable focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion to support our underrepresented students, and we commit to continuing these conversations throughout the university. We're also dedicated to addressing the safety and wellness on our campus, especially due to the impacts that we've experienced this past year. Finally, our platform offers many opportunities to collaborate with student organizations and campus partners alike to enact change for both undergraduate and graduate students.
Great. Thank you so much. And then we will start with the first round of questioning.
So for the first question, I'm going to start with Erin. With how the past 2 academic school years have gone with COVID-19, what are your plans to reintegrate the entire student body? This being the juniors and sophomores who have been on campus for 1 to 2 years, as well as the freshmen who are new to NC State.
Yeah, that's a great question. We really do have to consider how NC State is going to differ. And, you hear this phrase all the time, what the new norm will look like. Personally, Madison and I really want to consider this in the way that we're viewing accessibility in classes in general. We have a strong suspicion that online classes are likely going to be here to stay for a while as they offer students, non-traditional students maybe who have disabilities or any type of reason why they can't be getting to class on time, a way to have the educational experience that everyone has. And so we want to make sure that these online classes are beefed up and that we give faculty and staff the resources to create a truly accessible online education because we likely think it's here to stay. as well for the new students coming into NC State, they're going to be recognizing like what this new norm is. They're not going to know that it is the new norm. So what we want to do for them is we want to intentionally integrate these steps to letting them know what our environment is going to look like. So like Madison mentioned before, the QPR training. At orientation, there is some mention of the counseling center, but there's no really tools or steps used for students to use, just that the counseling center is here. Here's what people sometimes struggle with. So we want to intentionally include some basic QPR so that students coming in know that they're kind of equipped to deal with some of the mental stress that will likely be happening, as well as we're trying to enforce both the sexual assault training and revamp it. And we want to enforce the sensitivity training that the Black Student Coalition over the summer requested of the university. Now, while these things, enforcing trainings, are not going to change everything, it's setting the standard. And we think that's the best way to reintegrate NC State, kind of create the new norm without them even knowing.
And then Mackenzie, would you like me to repeat the question?
Please.
With how the past 2 academic school years have gone with COVID-19, what are your plans to reintegrate the entire student body? That being juniors and sophomores who haven't been on campus for 1 to 2 years, and freshmen who are new to New State.
So thank you for the question. I think the biggest part of our platform that will address this is the Select Commission on COVID-19 that I would reinstate from Melanie Flowers' student body president year. I served as that commission chair. We did a lot of great work making sure that the student voice was at least trying to be heard in the university's reopening plans. Did they pay attention to that? I'm not here to comment on that, but we did our very best to make sure that student voices were at least heard and at the table when they were making those decisions. So coming back in, especially with the university's announcement that they are wanting to be fully online, I don't personally 100% agree that we're fully in person, 100%. I don't necessarily know if we're going to be there. I think it has to do a lot with vaccination, but our COVID commission would specifically focus on, as students are coming back to campus, how are we supporting them through the struggles that COVID-19 has created for them? For example, food and housing insecurity. If there are students still struggling with that on campus, how are we going to use the COVID commission to really nail down and look hard at those conversations? And then as we transfer back into the in-person setting rather than the virtual setting, we've become really comfortable with online Zoom. We all know how to use it. And so one of Nat's really big points was the virtual activity nights and using those to kind of make sure that new students who are coming into the university who may be a little bit wary due to safety concerns, social anxiety about going to in-person events and meeting a lot of new people have the opportunity to still meet members of their wolf pack. And the last one that I'll touch on real fast is, as we come back, we have a point on here about supporting our students and educating our student government leaders about diversity, equity, and inclusion on campus, so that as our leaders are coming back, they know and they have the breadth of knowledge to support all of these students. So if a student comes to student government is equipped to connect them with resources and also handle that situation.
Awesome. So for the next question, I'll be asking this first to Mackenzie. So neither of your campaigns directly mention international students in your platforms. Considering international students make up a large portion of both the undergraduate and graduate student body, how are you going to ensure that these students will remain supported by your campaign?
Yes, thank you for the question. So 2 points that I'll touch on here. The first one being the Select Commission on Access to University Resources. So that is trying to compile all of the university resources available to all students, which would include international students, onto a tab in the MyPack portal or a similar website that we frequent as students. And that way, international students could have a list of resources that are already pre-prepared and in that portal that they have easy access to. The next one, as you mentioned, international students are a large portion of our graduate student population. We actually have an international graduate student from Panama on our campaign team, and we got a lot of great insight from her as to what her experience was in the university, how being an international student has shaped that experience. And the one thing that was super big for her was how is she financially affording to be at NC State and come to NC State? And so we have two very important points on here about addressing flexibility with graduate student hours so that they can work more hours and receive a larger paycheck and increase the flexibility with that. And then also addressing the graduate student support plan and how graduate students can really receive funding and support from that. There are a lot of really strict guidelines surrounding that, but one of the direct ways that the student body president can influence that is during the tuition and fees process. That's one of the things that as student body president, you have an oversight, you have a look into that you can advocate for. And so to address specifically the international graduate students, that would be one thing that as student body president, I would advocate for.
Asking the same question to Aaron Foote now. Neither of your campaigns directly mention international students in your platforms. Considering international students make up a large portion of both the undergraduate and graduate student body, how are you going to ensure that these students will remain supported by your campaign?
Yeah, great question. I do think across the board, Madison and I are really focused on making sure that, as our tagline says, every student deserves a voice. And so international students are generally speaking one of the most overlooked groups of students. And when we consider struggles of students, we often don't even understand the gravity or the complex nature of the struggles that they do face. So we want to include them on our various commissions, Title IX commission, and how a Title IX case might affect their student visa, as well as the COVID-19 commission, that's updates on schedule changes, university plans, et cetera, because during COVID, they faced a unique challenge. I think as Mackenzie might have referenced, a lot of our international students are grad students, and even more specifically, a lot of our international students are from India that are working on campus. And when campus closed and all students were laid off, these students were completely overlooked. Their student visa only allows them to work on campus, and they didn't have any sort of income. They were not allowed to get unemployment, and university resources weren't advertised for them. This is something that I've advocated for during COVID, and so it's something we intentionally want to include their voices in because we recognize that they struggle with these different things. Furthermore, when we talk about international students, there is a large portion of international students that are coming from Asian countries, and during COVID, Asian hate crimes and just racism in general has increased immensely. I think it's upwards of like 300% or 400%. It's something that's just an insane number. And so Madison and I, our values throughout our campaign have been removing what makes students feel unsafe. And so figuring out the best way to remove any sign of that racism or prejudice, because we've seen it in the past. There was a dorm where a student had a, never mind my time. Thank you.
Okay, this question is for Aaron. Many graduate students have expressed concern about mental health stipends and worker protections. How do you plan to advocate for and support graduate students if you are elected? And how is your current plan of focusing on administrative implementation of Grad Student Bill of Rights different than what was proposed and implemented during the 98th and 99th sessions?
So great question. Like you said, grad students, they face various different changes, and as student body president, they will be part of the people that I advocate for. But with any other different group on campus, it's not an identity that I hold or an experience that I fully understand. So this advocacy is going to come through partnerships, specifically with, of course, GSA and different, not just the big GSA, but also the smaller GSAs. In the past year, I've had great conversations with, I believe it's the Meteor Earth Environmental Sciences GSA, some random GSA like MEAS, and they've given me great insight about their experience and how to basically advocate for them. Our Bill of Rights isn't really different than what was proposed in the past. It's there because it's still a necessity. Obviously, we haven't seen it implemented. We haven't seen a lot of great progress on this. Now, I understand that COVID has kind of thrown a lot off, and priorities are getting by, surviving, getting your education somehow, But we really think that this is an important step to ensuring that grad students are treated fairly and with respect, that they feel safe with their advisors, that they're not working in a large number of hours because the university sees them as a student when it sees fit that it benefits them, and faculty when it benefits them at the same time. And so truly, I wouldn't say that our proposal for the Grad Student Bill of Rights is different, but it's still needed because we haven't seen that big change occur. And that once again, we're going to be doing this through partnerships with the GSAs. Of course, Madison and I are grad students.
Mackenzie, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Many graduate students have expressed concern about mental health, stipends, and worker protections. How do you plan to advocate for and support graduate students if you are elected? And how is your current plan of focusing on administrative implementation of Grad Student Bill of Rights different than what was proposed and implemented during the 98th and 99th sessions?
Great. I'll talk about the Graduate Student Bill of Rights real fast. There has been great work on the Graduate Student Bill of Rights. It is currently being workshopped within the university at the higher levels. And so that is something that, as you had mentioned, the 98th, 99th, and 100th session of student government have really pushed for, and we've finally made a lot of headway, and administration is taking that seriously finally. The platform point on our platform is just voicing our support for that and making sure that we will continually support that. As far as supporting graduate students, I actually attended one of the Graduate Student Association's meetings, and it was the strategic planning meeting for the university. And it was basically graduate students airing out their concerns and saying, this is where we need to see improvement. So I took notes during all of that, and I'm proud to say that that is where our graduate student platform has come from. One of the big points is reviewing the standards for graduate student mentors and advisors. There's wild discrepancies across all of the departments and programs about what that advising structure looks like, and it causes a lot of stress to graduate students. And so we are committed to working with graduate students, the Graduate Student Association, within our first 125 days in office, so over the summer, to review those standards and make recommendations to administration about that. I briefly touched on the flexibility for graduate student hours, making sure that they are receiving enough funds and finances to actually live comfortably in Raleigh. The other one for graduate students that we've heard of is the GRE. And so the graduate program as a whole doesn't require it, but certain departments do, and certain programs do. Nat and I are firm believers that a standardized test is probably one of the worst ways to tell if you are prepared for graduate school. And so we want to make sure that that is not a mitigating factor or a large factor in the application process. And we want to try and get rid of it entirely from that graduate program admissions.
Great. Next question.
Okay, so for the fourth question, I will start with Mackenzie. With everything that's been going on with the Black Lives Matter movement, as well as the Chadwick Seagraves controversy, what do you think SG's role in activism is? Also, what steps will you take in order to ensure an increasingly educated and tolerant campus community?
Thank you for the question. This is one thing that has been on my mind a lot, especially because of the identities I do hold and do not hold on campus. And we've been very intentional about making sure that we're supporting our students through this. So as far as student government's role in advocacy and those movements, we are here to serve as a facilitator. And if we hear student concern regarding this, we're going to support the students going through that process. I was one of the people who helped plan the student government freeze out in response to Chadwick Seagraves' response. And we tried to support a protest during the summer, but there was a little miscommunication there with the organizers. And so we felt it appropriate to pull our support there rather than continue on. And so I think the one thing that Nat and I are very committed to doing is making sure that we're having these constant communication channels with students of color, minority students on campus, students who we don't share identities with, to make sure that they have a seat at the table in all of our conversations, and that we're getting their perspective and lens on the situation. because I'll be honest, like I'm not gonna remember all the time, and I'll do my best. And I'm gonna make sure that our team is diverse so that if we have these concerns, I know who I can go to, and I know that my team will be able to be like, hey, Mackenzie, you might have overlooked this. Let's rethink this. How can we better support these groups of students? I have a really good advising structure already within SG, but also outside of SG, who helps me really think about my role in the university, my role interpersonally with students, and really is helping me grow as an individual. And so I'm just wanting to use that support and our role in student government to support all students.
Okay, so I actually have a follow-up question. In your platform, you state you only want SG members to take part of the Introduction to NC State Bias, Impact Response, and Discrimination and Harassment Prevention Response training. How will this benefit the student body as a whole? What additional training do you think the student body needs on these issues?
Yes, thank you for the follow-up. So we want to make sure that as student government members, because we're not all going to hold the same identities, that our members are educated enough about the processes and communities and organizations that exist within the university and are knowledgeable about how to connect students with that. And so we want to make sure that our students are trained on that. Specifically, the bias, impact, response, and discrimination and harassment. I think that those are important to consider and to have students go through, just so as students are coming to individuals with concerns, they may realize, oh, this might be something that needs to go somewhere in the counseling center, the women's center, the GLBT center. And then as far as making sure that we're educating our members about different and diverse groups that they don't have these same identities with, we want to get the QPR training by Prevention Services, Supporting Survivors 101 by the Movement Peer Educators, and then the Project Safe Ally workshop offered by the GLBT Center for all of our student government members, both executive branch and the more external facing senators. That way, if a student does come to them with concerns, they have that option and they are aware of how to best support that student. If there are other ones that you feel in your position as a student, Nubian message editor-in-chief, or any general student feel like student government should receive training on this, Nat and I are more than happy to have that conversation and look about what that looks like within our organization. How can we best do that, and how can we best facilitate that? So the primary goal here is to make sure our students and our leaders are listening and empathizing with the students as they come with their concerns to SG.
And so now I'll ask the first question to Aaron. With everything that's been going on with the Black Lives Matter movement, as well as the Chadwick CJ controversy, what do you think SG's role in activism is? Also, what steps will you take in order to ensure an increasingly educated and tolerant campus community?
Great question. So it is a bit of a philosophical question. Like Mackenzie said, it's something I've grappled with even within my 3 years in student government, and something I've tried to figure out the best way to approach as a member and representative of student government. Personally, I've kind of fallen on the belief that SG's role is one of supporting students throughout the process of understanding which administration or which administrative office is the best one to reach with this, which people in administration are actually here to listen to. Typically, we're looking at like student affairs people. It's their job to hear student concern, as well as kind of support throughout how to connect with different student groups. If we have some people wanting to do it and another group of students has already come to us and said they were interested, then we get to be that bridge in between as kind of more of a facilitator. Another role we have is providing resources. The biggest thing SG kind of has is appropriations. And there are some things you can, and there are some things we can't fund, but as well as supporting them by telling these groups what we can fund and what we can do to help kind of bulk up this kind of activism and to help make it the most efficient way that it can look. And then the last way is spreading awareness. I find it highly uncontroversial that we don't want someone who's in a white supremacist group on campus. And when there's a protest, we should be spreading awareness of it. I know there was one today at 5 o'clock that went around. And so I would have really loved for SG to spread awareness of that event, because we need to unite against this this kind of idea, like white supremacy. I feel like that's the most uncontroversial statement of the night, but when there's something that greatly threatens the safety of students, something that Madison and I include in our platform, it's not going to be controversial for us to support this event against that thing.
And then I also have a follow-up question for you. In your platform, you mentioned advocating for the change of one of the diversity GEPs to be an African American Studies course. How do you, or how would you foresee this implementation benefiting students of color specifically?
Great question. And I realize I also didn't finish a part of your last question, so I'll tie that in there as well. The way we want to kind of educate students is, like I think I previously mentioned, is enforcing the sensitivity training on incoming students. Of course, training is not the end all be all. It's mostly performative, but that kind of sets the standard for what to expect when you come to state. So kind of connecting that to what you specifically asked here, the diversity GEP requirement came out through conversations with different professors, such as Dr. Ferguson, who I believe, I might be wrong, teaches philosophy of race and who has studied this. And so specifically how we see that benefiting students of color is maybe a little bit, maybe it's a bit of a long-term goal, and I recognize that, but it's kind of creating a more educated NC State where people are more aware about the intersection of race and other identities, about race theory, and cannot really claim ignorance for some of their discriminatory and blatantly racist actions. I also do think it will benefit white students at a PWI, expanding your horizon, not being a bit coddled at a university that was created for people who look and live just like you. So that's an initiative that we're really excited for, a theme that I've constantly hit on, kind of setting that standard about what we expect, and then working towards long-term goals of removing these barriers that affect like systemic racism on our own campus.
Awesome. That wraps up round one of the president portion. And so we'll go straight into round two. And just a reminder, each candidate will have a question specifically for them. They'll have 2 minutes to answer, and then 2 minutes right after for the other candidate to jump in and for you both to debate. And so after the other candidate is done talking, feel free to just jump right into the debate portion. And then back to Elikem.
So this first question is for Aaron again. Your campaign mentions various changes directly related to COVID-19 this semester, including inequalities that arose from the switch to online classes. Considering that NC State just recently announced the upcoming fall semester plans, which is predicted to be entirely in person, how are you going to ensure that this transition back to normalcy is still as inclusive as possible?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, first of all, like we're going to answer with almost every question, we're really focused on the student voice. So we have that COVID-19 commission, which is not really looking specifically at what COVID-19 is doing, because that's going to be short term. It will be gone sometime in the future. Who knows when? I hope it's tomorrow. It probably won't be. But setting long-term goals for how the university integrates the knowledge of kind of public health into our campus. And so our views on making the return to campus most inclusive as possible is really focusing on accessibility and the long-term effects of COVID. So, for example, the financial need-based housing is a project that I've been passionate about for roughly 2 years. As the price of living goes up and apartments off campus go up, making sure that students who are greatly impacted by COVID are able to be on campus where it is more affordable. Furthermore, we think that, like I mentioned before, online classes probably are not going to leave. Students will not feel safe even when certain numbers of our population are or aren't vaccinated. And so making sure that faculty and staff are given training to figure out the most accessible way to create online classes, whether it be something that we include, which is requiring that live captioning is on for all Zoom events, or just making sure that most people have their camera on so you can kind of see what they're saying for students who are deaf or maybe hard of hearing. So really long-term, COVID is not going to be an issue for all of eternity, but the other ways that COVID has impacted us will be financial insecurity, housing insecurity, food insecurity, accessibility and inclusion, and gaining your education and making it equitable.
So specifically with your COVID-19 commission, Erin, what would you do differently than what the commission that current student body president Melanie Flowers has implemented?
Yeah, great question. So that commission is that we want to create would not necessarily be entirely different. Likely we would want to include more student voices, kind of beef up the commission. But this commission, we want to focus on a bill that I co-wrote in the 99th session, I believe, which was R145, which was a student COVID student support responsibility. Doesn't matter. The name doesn't matter. But in the bill, it talks about kind of creating a public health committee and focusing on how the university views public health in general. These issues that we've seen with COVID, these have been facing people with different disorders and health issues the whole time. And so we want to figure out how to make public health more intentionally included into the structure of our campus. And so, for example, I believe a year ago, there was an epidemic of like chlamydia and no one knew about it and there was no resources for it in Raleigh, in the area. And we really do want to support students and make sure that public health is more of an intentional conversation and the way that it kind of impacts, finances, accessibility, inclusion, things like that.
Okay, so you currently sit on the COVID Commission as the dining representative, yet we've completed and written 3 reports for this session representing the student voice, and you have only worked on one of those and actively participated on that commission as one of those. What would you do differently as student body president to address that?
Okay, yes. Thank you for that. My schedule and my personal life have been greatly affected by COVID. And so I've had some difficulties doing some of that work. And sure, I admit that. What I would do different is creating the commission and then picking people to serve it. Oh, that's...
Sorry. So sorry.
Okay.
Okay, next question.
All right, this question is for Mackenzie. Given that you're the current student body vice president, what have you done that you were most proud of and what were some of your shortcomings? How would you improve and what would you do differently from your current administration if elected?
Such a fun question. So I think the thing that I am most proud of is probably the COVID Commission. Coming in, that was something that Melanie and I were not expecting to do, not expecting to have to deal with. And it really threw us for a loop. And we really had to step up to the plate and kind of address how are we going to approach this? How are we going to get student feedback on this? And how are we going to make sure students are being heard during this time? And so we were very intentional at having conversations with students. I had conversations with, I think, about 10 to 20 students about their experience with COVID-19. I also facilitated and got in contact with Justine Hollingshead and Barry Olson from the Division of Academic and Student Affairs to bring them into the Senate so the Senate could have listening sessions and recommendation sessions for how we should proceed for the spring session. We've published about 3 reports that are about 13 pages long that really voice student concerns. As far as what I would have improved upon and what we're going to do differently this session, I think Melanie and I didn't come in with the expectation of having to support our directors through this and how much support was necessary. I've had to do a lot of growing both as a person and as a leader. And so I've become more empathetic and better understand what it is like to serve and work with the directors. And so one thing that Nat and I are going to be very intentional about is making sure that we're encouraging diverse communities to apply to our cabinet, but we're also creating a holistic onboarding process so that they feel supported and that they can work on the initiatives that they want to work on while also trying to complete our platform.
Okay, appreciate everything you said, Mackenzie. I have two questions, but I'll start with the first. Can you tell me one thing that you've achieved on your own as an initiative throughout your time as Vice President, please?
Yeah, so I think it's really the COVID Commission. Like I just said, we've worked on 3 reports. Even though there are other people on that, it's still very impressive to lead that group, especially because people are very busy. And so being able to really coordinate that and make sure that you're reviewing it and that it's in depth enough and really highlights the student experience, that is something that I am very proud of. And will say that is one of my accomplishments in student government this session.
Okay, so how did you, one, what did the report do? And 2, how did you make it accessible for students? Because I'm pretty sure 90% of students probably haven't seen it.
So what that report did was, especially as administration over the summer was trying to figure out how we best approach this, and also how we once we ended up shifting to online, how do we do this effectively? The COVID Commission report really came in handy for them. It was directly sent to the chancellor and all the coronavirus task forces, and it was well received. We heard good feedback from administration for it. As far as how was that put out to the student body, if you go to the student government website, we have a current concerns tab with COVID-19 that lists everything that student government has been doing for COVID-19. There are the meeting minutes for the commission, all of the reports as well. Those are all public knowledge that is fairly easy to find if you peruse the student government website. I'm also, if a student was very concerned with it, they could have emailed me. I personally met with 10 to 15 students, 10 to 20 students, like I said, to really get their feedback on that report. And so that's personally how I reached.
So students need to come to SG, SG doesn't need to come to students? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's just in this format that we gave students the space, and we were open and we reached out to students, and we also brought admin to students.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Rachel, that was very targeted.
Okay, next question.
This question is for Aaron. This year with the pandemic, the student body saw the importance of Feed the Pack more than ever. However, campus and entities like these, as well as other resources like free feminine products on campus, are often undersupported and underfunded. How will you support these initiatives during your term and raise awareness of these to the student body?
Yeah, that's very true. COVID has affected food security. A little throwback to the past, in 2018, it was 14% of students who identified as being food insecure. And I think you can make the easy argument that COVID has impacted it without having a concise study yet. The way we want to support this is by making connections with different campus groups. I already have strong connections with campus enterprises. I've worked there for 2.5 years until I got fired or laid off, whatever, because of COVID. And partnering with them and working with them to increase donations to Feed the Pack. A lot of the options are not, I know we keep harping on the same points, but they're not inclusive for people with different religious backgrounds or with different diseases or disorders that cause them to have special diets. So what we really want to do is kind of form that connection with campus enterprises and ask them to commit to donating food, as well as using our intentional platform points of outreach instead of communication to push it out there and doing, trying our best to make SG, like I kind of harped on, accessible to the students and not ask the students to come to SG.
So one of the big issues that Pack Essentials and the Feed the Pack Pantry is facing this year, and COVID has just really shown this, is that they're not supported from the university very well. They don't have a set budget by the university. So how would you and Madison address this issue moving forward? Yeah,
so that's really, admittedly, that's a long-term issue. we don't like to commit to things that we don't think that we can get done. But like I said, a bit of a workaround for as we work towards that is making that partnership with campus enterprises with the vast connections that I have there and asking them to help increase the food there so that students are really getting their needs met. And campus enterprises has generally been willing to do different initiatives across campus to try to make it more accessible, or at least they've shown that they've cared. So we kind of have that workaround for now as we work to address the greater needs that Feed the Pack has, as that's probably something that conversations we will start that will be addressed in in following sessions.
So, hold on, sorry, lost my train of thought. That's something that I've worked on very closely with a team of SBOs to do, is a basic needs coordinator position for all the Pack Essentials. But have you discussed what the needs of Pack Essentials and the Feed the Pack pantry are? Or have you talked to the leadership team there to get their feedback on that?
Yes, I've had various conversations with different entities across campus, and we've been more so focused on kind of what it's lacking and how that's affecting students with different who are immunocompromised in various ways.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that you had conversations with Rose and the leadership team over at Feed the Pack.
Time. Thank you. Next question.
Okay, so this question is for Mackenzie. A majority of your platform hinges on the possibility that next year your university will actually be able to return to in-person operations. With the way that COVID-19 has been going, there is the potential that this could not be a possibility. So what is your backup plan if COVID-19 continued to be a prominent issue? How will you transform your administration and your goals to a virtual space?
Thank you for the question. I think this is something that Melanie and I learned very quickly this year of how COVID has impacted stuff. Reviewing our platform, I think a lot of the big points for Nat and I are still very transferable over to in a virtual setting and space, and being very intentional about how we go about those. A lot of them are making sure that we continue to have conversations about what the future of NC State looks like in supporting students. So for graduate students, these are long-term conversations that need to be had, and COVID is a great time to have them. As far as wellness, we still want to make sure that NC State and student government is really focusing on wellness. And there are a lot of things we can do, even in a virtual setting, to kind of address that. So we can look at our internal culture about how we kind of go about that, and how do we make Senate meetings more accessible? How do we make the executive cabinet more engaged and more accessible? How can we make all of this more accessible so that we can better support students? And then as far as like communicating and kind of engaging with the students, I think people are just burned out from Zoom. So can we come up with other ways to do this? If we're half in person, half hybrid, what does that look like? Can we do it safely doing it in person? How do we still engage? I think the one thing that would be a really great way to do that is see if clubs and organizations would be interested in us coming to their meetings, kind of engaging with them, sitting through the entire meeting and not just popping in to get questions and answers, do a Q&A session. And so I think I fully expect COVID to hit the university and switch a little bit of their plan. I don't expect to be fully in person, but I think our platform will transition well to the online space.
I'm interested if you could kind of discuss how your platform will address the issues that will arise if the university plans to stay all in person and moves forward with that plan, and then suddenly in person, we have to do a third transition to all online or reduced classes again.
Yeah, so I think my experience handling that situation that has already occurred as student body vice president would be really impactful and helpful here. Part of the COVID commission would also be making sure that if the university decides to move forward with fully reopening, that they have backup plans, even if they don't publicize them, that student government is holding them accountable for backup plans. I think that's one of the reasons why we failed in the fall, is that we didn't have backup plans and they just went in guns blazing. with the high hopes that we would be able to stay, making sure that we have backup plans, and we're advocating that we have, if we, Lord forbid, that we move off campus halfway through the semester, that we have a week off, we have some amount of time off to move out, but then also that we have breaks worked in. The wellness days do not work. We've heard that from students consistently. Student government, in my opinion, didn't really get a say in that process because we would have been against it. I personally am against it. They're kind of terrible. My mental health has taken a big hit because of all the work that I've had to do on those mental health days and the wellness days. So that's how we would kind of proactively approach that issue.
Okay, yeah, and then follow-up question. You talk about holding administration accountable for having a backup plan. How are you going to do that? What is it going to look like? How are you going to get student input on that? What people are you going to talk to? Yeah,
so really quickly, since I know we're running out of time, Rachel, that would just be, if they don't want to do it, student government is going to have one that we give to them. And we're going to, as one of my favorite directors likes to say, we have to be comfortable being uncomfortable and pushing for what the students want.
Thank you. Next question.
This question is for Aaron Foote. Currently, your plans for sustainability are increasing power towel composting, promoting the use of aluminum recyclable cups, and calling for the university to divest from fossil fuels. What specific actions will you take to achieve these goals, and who do you plan on collaborating with?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, talk about the biggest one. Divestment is something that's been a conversation for so long. There was legislation in 98, legislation in 99, legislation at the UNC ASG level. And so it's obviously something that without a doubt we can understand this is something that students want. Up to 6.3% of our endowment is vested in fossil fuels. And so this is something that we are going to have to address at the UNC level. Coincidentally, I would be at the UNC ASG level with my seat on this Council of Student Body Presidents. So that's something that I can work towards there, directly interacting with the ASG president, who has a direct seat on Board of Governors. Other issues that we want to get done, of course, in any issue, we want to partner with sustainability groups on campus, NC State Recycles and facilities to help to initiate these, as well as with cups, we're kind of focusing on athletics, which athletics and then concessions is kind of a subdivision of Campus Enterprises. It's a group that I have connections with already and that have usually been willing to make this meaningful change on campus. And then with the paper towel composting, we want to work with facilities and NC State Recycles just to see, how that's gonna be implemented, what buildings we could expand them to, hopefully every building, but maybe not. As well as something that Madison kind of brought up before, our platform, we consider it a bit of a working document. We have our base initiatives, so what we stand for, but we're interested in hearing what different sustainability orgs kind of have to offer and things we can do to make the campus more innovative and more sustainable.
So I was reading your sustainability platform and it seemed very familiar to me. And so I went back and found Sam Brohow and Aaron Foote's campaign from last year. Is there a reason you copy and pasted the majority of your platform from that document?
Yes, there is. I haven't seen any meaningful change take place, and so the platform is still relevant. So that's why it's still an issue at campus.
So all the changes due to COVID-19, all the changes due to racial inequities that have occurred in the past year, those weren't relevant and your platform shouldn't reflect those changes?
My platform does reflect those changes. We have points about COVID. We have points about diversity inclusion that's more intentional and that takes it a step above what we've seen in the past. I'm not insinuating that things that arise were not important. What I'm insinuating is that the changes that I wish to see happen in the past election did not happen. And so they're still relevant.
So to that, you served as Title IX Commission Chair. You served as Assistant Director for University Affairs in this current administration. Melanie and I have been very graceful and given our directors and department members a lot of room to pursue these initiatives. Why didn't you pursue those initiatives?
Because you delegated your directors to fulfilling your platform, and they were not a part of your platform.
But we also gave departments a very wide breadth of opportunity to do that. And at least from my understanding, the University Affairs Director was very open to hearing the concerns and kind of the topics that that department wanted to address.
Okay. That's not my experience working with her necessarily. She was very focused on getting done what she promised to get done. I'm not sure exactly what you're insinuating. I haven't seen the changes that I wanted to see take place, and so they're still relevant. That's it.
Thank you. Time. Next question.
This question is from Mackenzie. Diversity outreach is one of the pillars of your platform. How do you see yourself and members of your administration collaborating with important campus facilities like the African American Cultural Center and the GLBT Center throughout the academic year?
This is something that I am personally very excited about. I know we've tried to be very intentional about those connections this year, and Nat and I are very committed to being very intentional about that as well. All of the points under our diversity outreach platform and our platform in general are also caveated, and included in that is the expectation that we have for our directors, anyone engaging in those conversations, that if you don't hold those identities, if you're not a part of those groups, that you're seeking that input out, or you're seeking that input, and you're connecting with those students and those organizations on campus. As student body president, I am committed to sitting down with these organizations, learning about their experience and kind of what that looks like on NC State's campus, and then making sure that Nat and I and our executive cabinet, as we move forward with these initiatives, are really it's not a one and done, that as we do these platform initiatives, that we go back to them. It's a continual conversation between these groups and community centers on campus to ensure that if we make a change, if we take a step forward or a step in the wrong direction, that they are there before that project and initiative gets to a level that we can't correct, or it's no longer helpful to that community that we're advocating for. And so it's not going to be us having that conversation and then leaving them to the wayside. It will very much be, this is the group that is going to work on this. This is the team that is really championing this cause. And as we go into meetings with administration, I'm going to be very intentional about making sure that those students are invited to that space. If it's a meeting with Chancellor Woodson and we're meeting about that topic, I will add you to that calendar invite. You will be invited to that meeting because it's very much your initiative as well as ours.
Okay. So can you tell me one of your initiatives that are diversity inclusion based that actually affect the entire student body and not just the composition of or the structure of student government?
Yeah, so one of the big ones that we want to address over the summer is the UNC Board of Governors Racial Equity Task Force recommendations. For those of you who don't know, the UNC Board of Governors, that task force released 6 action steps and 6 recommendations and 28 action steps for the UNC system. That was a conversation that happened in December 2020. And so we want to really sit down with students, student organizations, OIED, administration, bring this up to the forefront of the conversation about how are we really implementing these and how is that impacting our students. And we do have some of those in place from what I was reading briefly of them. I can't remember which ones they are off the top of my head, but we have some in place, but reviewing those and making sure that if we do already have a system in place similar to that, is it actually supporting the students that it's meant to be supporting? Is it achieving that goal that it should be achieving? And if it's not, taking a step back and saying, okay, we need to reevaluate this and doing that with students.
Okay. Can you tell me why you think that this task force, which was composed of the Board of Governors and mostly white older men?
So it wasn't the UNC Board of Governors. It was closely tied to them. It was a committee that was chaired by someone close to the board. And then there were students' input on there. There were from various communities across the UNC system, there were very diverse voices. So it wasn't just the UNC Board of Governors as a group of white men making this decision and releasing the report.
Can you name one actionable thing from that list, please?
Time. Very sorry. Time. Next question.
Okay, so this question is for Aaron. During the past school year, residence halls like Tucker and Owen have added elevators to make them more accessible. However, there are still several residence halls and buildings that are very difficult to access. How will you and your running mate actively push for change in your meetings with university housing, the university architect office, or even within student senate?
Yeah, so in regards to having these changes to promote accessibility, we kind of want to meet them at what would be the best argument. So for right now, Grad is empty. Grad is one of the arguably least accessible buildings on campus. They're already undergoing construction. Now would be the perfect time. Coming to them with that argument, they're more likely to kind of agree with us because it's, in my opinion, common sense. But as well as we kind of want to partner with the university architect for having our plan in general focus on being ADA inclusive, just in order to make sure that our campus reflects the values that we want it to, that accessibility. And then when it's easy or when it's not, that we're pushing for these changes to occur. And then sometimes it will be something that can happen now, like Grad likely is something that we can start now. And in other cases, it's influencing the university's master plan so that buildings are intentionally inclusive already.
Can you speak to how you're financially going to afford to be able to do that, especially with university housing having hemorrhaged money from COVID-19 and having to send everyone home? What is how are you financially going to afford to be able to do that? Because I agree it needs to be done, but how are you going to afford to do that?
So obviously, I'm not going to be student body treasurer. I'm not going to be university administration. The university has 40,000 undergrads and they're receiving money all the time. They're not broke. The university should be supporting these projects that make education accessible for all students. I think it's more than reasonable to say that our university should be able to find money to put this forward, and I'm sure they already have it.
So that would be a large sum of money to do that, especially with the updates to Grad that will be necessary. Are there any services in your mind that you would be willing to cut to afford that? Because if you pull from money from somewhere, it has to come from somewhere.
I'm not the person who runs the university budget. I just advocate for the needed changes on behalf of the students. I also don't like to imagine things that need to happen as what if they don't happen, because then it leaves the room in my mind that it won't get done. I think this is pretty common sense. You agree that it needs to happen. I don't know why we're kind of working in hypotheticals here with things that are outside of my range and control.
So the other issue with that is, what if you're told no?
What if I'm told no? Okay, great. I love being told no, actually, because it gives me this kind of motivation to keep going. Something that I've done in the past is run social media campaigns to gain student support. So if they said no, I would likely get a senator to push a bill through Senate, run that social media campaign by posting stuff on people's stories like I did with the COVID-19 bill in order to make sure there's attendance so they know that it's something we care about because they have the money.
Time. Thank you. And then on to the last question.
Alrighty. This question is for Mackenzie Hellman. In your campus security fee increase platform, you mentioned advocating for substance abuse counseling and hiring qualified officers for Title IX cases. How are you going to ensure campus security also tackles racial discrimination and bias on campus?
Yes, so that campus security fee, for everyone who doesn't know on the call or watching on the video live stream, your campus security fee will be increased by $30. So your new campus security fee will be $60. That was a very sudden change brought by the UNC Board of Governors. That loose guidance that was provided there was for the substance abuse and the Title IX hearing officers. Specifically, how will we advocate for the racial discrepancies in police officers and that experience, we want to work with students to make sure that any report that or incident that we see and hear gets immediately to Chief House, and that they are taking that very seriously and trying to be as transparent as possible with that. One of the things that I am very proud that President Flowers has already is a very strong connection with Chief House this academic year, and basically on a text-to-text basis. And so we want to continue that and making sure that students are that the process is very transparent for students. And so that as those incidences occur, we're responding appropriately, making sure that everything is fully investigated, and that the students are safe during that process.
Okay, so you talk about making sure that it's transparent. And so in student government, we have this focus on communication and that the information is available, but the students don't know about it. Majority of students never know when an election is happening. Voter turnout is always an issue. So how are you going to actually make sure that it's known about, or are you only committing that the information will be available?
So we will be committed to making sure that that is publicly known. The best way to do that, in my opinion, is on our website, because a lot of that information would be a little bit too dense for social media and social media consumption. However, our communications department is amazing this year, and I'm sure it will be amazing next year. And we'll be able to work with that as well. One of the things that I'm very proud about is our diversity outreach department this year has been very intentional, at least in the past few months, of making sure that students who have those concerns know that they can reach out to her and that she's going to take that very seriously. And so making sure that we're committing and working with her to address those, and whoever is in that role, that we're being very aggressive on that front.
Okay, and so the campus security fee first was proposed for increasing policing, and thanks to the work of people at ASG, including President Flowers, it's been turned into something that is more agreeable and more beneficial. But obviously with policing, there are certain groups on campus that it would make them feel unsafe. How are you gonna make them know and get their input on things like this?
So again, I think it's going to those communities, making ourselves open to that community and responding very quickly and very thoroughly about that, and making sure that we're supporting them and not responding and then going, hey, we responded, is this okay? Making sure that we connect with them, we empathize with them, we understand what they're going through, and really listening to that experience and how that is impacting them, and taking those concerns and then going directly to Chancellor Woodson, Chief House, individuals in charge who have say over that process, and making sure that they're hearing students' concerns.
Thank you. Time. So that wraps the last portion of the president debate. And so now we have closing statements from each of the candidates, and they each have 1 minute, and we'll start with Erin, and you can begin whenever.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for attending, for hearing me out, and thank you for listening to exactly what I have to say. I'm truly honored to be running for student body president with my good friend, Madison Keys, because I've worked tirelessly to improve my leadership and improve what is getting done at NC State, and I'm ready to bring that into the future. And so I'll leave you with what we care about the most. We care about equity, ensuring that everyone has this equal access to their education. We care about unity, creating a wolf pack that feels like one, not by unifying with that which removes the comfort from different members of our community, but removing it in order to be able to unify. And we care about safety, making sure that students feel safe. We believe that every student deserves a voice, and we really, in our platform, show that we care about that. And so we really hope you use yours on March 15th.
Great, thank you. Mackenzie, you can start whenever.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you everyone for taking your time from a Friday evening to join us for the debate. We hope it's been very informative for you. I would personally like to thank the technician and Nubian Message for hosting the debate in this virtual format. I know it's been kind of weird. If you've heard anything tonight that interests you, or you have any questions about it, please feel free to review our platform at mckinseyandnat.com or on our social medias at mckinseyandnat, and email us, get in contact with us. More than happy to hear your concerns and talk about what that looks like and how we can implement that in our platform. Finally, I just want to reiterate that Nat and I have been very intentional about crafting our platform, and we're proud to say that each point came directly from a student experience at NC State. With that, I will wish you all a good night, and please remember to vote for Mackenzie and Nat on March 15th and 16th. Go Pack!
Awesome. Thank you so much. So that wraps up the debate. However, we do have a surprise question for all 4 candidates to answer. Each ticket will answer together because we're very interested in this, but you'll have 2 minutes to answer and there'll be no option to debate. So Ugonna, if you would like to say the question.
This question will first be targeted at Aaron and Madison. What experience do you have working together as a team?
Great question. Madison and I have known each other our entire career at NC State. I, a long time ago, looked back and she was like the only person who liked my post on NCSU 22 when I was trying to put myself out there. We've both been passionate about the same things and we both work together in different fields. Madison, if you want to continue like a partnership with this one, I feel like is important.
Yeah, so we actually served as orientation leaders together, which was like a really, really enjoyable experience for both of us. We got even closer through that experience. We were also resident mentors at the same year, even though we were in different villages. We had those similar experiences of leading students, and we just found ourselves like even having more connections to kind of fall back on. So honestly, when we decided to run together, it felt like just the most perfect thing to do.
Yes.
So
I'm beyond grateful that she has decided to run with me, and her commitment to this ticket is beyond what I can imagine.
Yeah, I would say the same.
Are y'all done? Okay. This question, I'm not gonna ask the same question to Mackenzie and Natalie. What experience do you have working together as a team?
Great, Nat, I can kick us off. So Nat and I met first year as, because we're in the same major. And so we had that fun experience of going through our first year engineering classes together, really stressing and really struggling through that. And we really found that we really supported each other really well going through that homework process. As we went through the struggles of being first year students here, we also found that we were great support systems for each other outside of the classroom and in our personal lives. Nat and I have grown very close, and she'll always be one of those friends that no matter what happens, I know I can turn to, and she'll be a supporting figure in my life. Nat, do you want to add on some stuff real fast?
Yes, I just want to echo everything Mackenzie said, but also Mackenzie has always been one of those people, the friendship we have had, we just bounce off each other so well. I think the different personalities that we hold and the various experiences we've had have only like strengthened our friendship and have made us like more supportive of each other and more aware of like what each other's going through. Yeah, Mackenzie has just always been somebody that I could turn to for anything I needed since freshman year. Since like the moment I met him, I was like, I like this kid. We get along. And I have really enjoyed getting to run with him and work on our platform and this whole ticket together.
I will add on that, like, I think it's very important that Nat and I have had very different leadership experiences here at NC State, because there are just things that with my lens as an OL and coming from housing that I just completely missed in our platform and that she has been able to catch. And I think that differing opinion, that like different lens of not being an orientation leader, not being in housing was really impactful for Nat. And I think that's what sets her apart from all of the candidates on this call, is that because she doesn't have that experience, we don't have that very similar leadership experience in the university. We have a wider breadth of what that looks like.
Thank you. All right, now that is the official real end of the debate. Thank you all so much for coming.